Good evening, everyone. Starting about a minute late after some iPad problems here, but we're all set. Welcome to the April 25th, 2023 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. We're going to start with a poetry reading, as we usually do, and we have a special guest today, representing our poet laureate. Come on up.
Present. Well, first of all, I want to thank the town very much for supporting the arts as well as it does, and considering the arts and poetry as a form of recreation and recreation. Just brilliant. We hope to see, just pick up that opportunity and develop it strength to strength. The poem that I have brought today is a short one of my own, and it has to do with Carrboro history, so I hope you like it. It talks about a little landmark that you may yourselves have walked past quite often, the millstone, just down the road from here. The millstone, set in a front yard at the intersection of two roads in Carrboro, North Carolina, knows what we lost in all that talk of stone, stone against stone, which is best for grinding, which can be got, at what price. What we lost of the quarryman's work, the millers and the blacksmiths and the masons, and flour dust and stone dust in the lungs, the hunger, the dried corn jittering and shushing in the hopper, the crackling, quick-cut, scissoring grind between the millstones, runner stone, bedstone, gossip and negotiations. What is lost of the stone's own language that comes in long, slow waves, stone years in the coming.
Beautiful.
Our history goes back a long, long ways. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Is that your own? Oh, nice.
Thanks, thanks, Maura. And if you want to look up Maura's work, Maura High, she's a local poet and works closely with our poet laureate on some of the Poetry Month events this month and with our Poets Council. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks, Maura. Council members, I just want to let folks know that Councilmember Fouché is in Concord this week for the North Carolina League of Municipalities City Vision Annual Conference, which is why she's not with us this evening. We'll see her back here next week. All right, I have a couple of proclamations to read, but no special guests, so I get to stand up there all by myself. I'm going to start with Arbor Day. This is our annual Arbor Day proclamation, which helps us meet our obligations to the Arbor Day Foundation, which has been awarding Carrboro a Tree City USA designation for many, many years now. I think maybe Trish will know how many total, but they're up here. They go back a ways. Whereas on Arbor Day, we celebrate trees and honor their essential role in the ecology of the planet. As the Arbor Day Foundation states, trees provide the very necessities of life itself. They clean our air, protect our drinking water, create healthy communities, and feed the human soul. And whereas the history of Arbor Day dates back to 1872, when J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for planting trees. On April 10th, 1872, the date of the first Arbor Day, approximately 1 million trees were planted in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the United States and by nations around the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of topsoil, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate temperature, produce oxygen, provide habitat for wildlife, trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for homes, fuel for fires, and countless other products. And whereas while the rise in atmospheric carbon is radically altering the Earth's environment, trees can help mitigate this by removing carbon from the atmosphere through carbon sequestration. And whereas trees also increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of commercial areas, and beautify the community. And whereas Carrboro has long been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and seeks to encourage open, honest discussion of ecological issues and find solutions to the environmental challenges we face. And whereas Morton once said, each generation takes the earth as trustees, we ought to bequeath to posterity as many forests and orchards as we have exhausted and consumed. And in this spirit, the town's Public Works Department will join other communities in celebrating the national observance of Arbor Day by planting trees in Henry Anderson III Community Park, And now therefore I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the Town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 28th, that's this coming Friday, to be Arbor Day in Carrboro, this the 25th day of April 2023. And having read that proclamation, I'll just want to acknowledge our interim Public Works Director, Daniel Snipes, who will be leading the team, I think, to plant these new trees in Anderson Park, and thank our staff for that work. All right, the second proclamation for this evening, this is proclamation season, by the way. I have multiple proclamations coming up for the next several weeks, and I appreciate the staff for all their work in bringing this forward. This is an important one to many of us, I know. This is a proclamation for Bike Month. Whereas National Bike Month is a reminder that biking can be added to many people's transportation routines, especially considering that 28% of all trips are a mile or shorter, and 40% of all trips are 2 miles or shorter, according to the National Household Travel Survey. And whereas transportation is now the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in North Carolina, and biking is an easy way for people to reduce their carbon footprint and advance the town's climate action goals by avoiding the use of single occupancy vehicles and reducing reliance on non-renewable resources for transportation. And whereas high-quality bicycle facilities, together with pedestrian infrastructure and public transit, can help communities achieve equity goals by expanding the availability of transportation alternatives that are less costly and more accessible for more people. And whereas National Bike Month is also an opportunity to experience the joys and health benefits of biking, to get outside during the spring season, and to see and experience the community at a different scale and pace. And whereas in 2010, Carrboro became the first community in North Carolina to be designated a silver-level bicycle-friendly community by the League of American Bicyclists, and numerous town plans include policies that support biking, such as the Carrboro Connects Comprehensive Plan, the Updated Bike Plan, and the Safe Routes to School Strategic Action Plan. And whereas the town will promote biking at several upcoming events, including the Ride with the Mayor and the Carrboro Bike Breakfast on May 9th, the Bike to the Carrboro Farmers Market on May 17th, the Carrboro Bike on Bus Workshop, and Carrboro Ride for the Ages, I think that's a new one this year, maybe, on May 20th, and other events organized with local partners, including the Town of Chapel Hill, the Carrboro Bicycle Coalition, and the Bicycle Alliance of Chapel Hill. And whereas more work is needed at local and regional levels to ensure that more residents are able to participate in planning for infrastructure improvements and have equitable access to bicycle infrastructure so that biking and biking in combination with transit are reliable options for commuting and for meeting everyday needs. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the Town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim May 2023, this is a long list of proclamation, proclaimed days here, May 2023 to be Bike Month, Wednesday, May 3rd to be Bike and Roll to School Day, May 15th through May 21st to be Bike to Work Week, and Friday, May 19th to be Bike to Work Day in Carrboro. I encourage all residents to add biking to their transportation routines, to become advocates for biking, bicycle infrastructure, and bicycle-friendly laws and policies, and to take delight in every ride. Thanks very much to everyone, and I want to thank, in this case, staff from our planning department and our community partners for planning all of these events coming up. There are a host of events both in Carrboro and Chapel Hill coming up in May to celebrate Bike Month. Something for everyone, I think. So thanks very much. Next up, we have our announcement of upcoming meetings. Mr. Clerk.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I have just two this time. First up, tomorrow, April 26th, we have a Racial Equity Commission meeting at 108 Bim Street, and that's actually going to be at 4 p.m. instead of the usual 6 p.m. So please note that at 4 p.m. And then next Tuesday, we have our next council meeting, and that was Tuesday, May 2nd at 7 o'clock. That's all I have.
Any other events and meetings to note? Randy and then Susan.
Yeah, Thursday, I have the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, Equity, and Justice meeting. And I just wanted to remind folks that Earth Day was rescheduled from last Sunday due to inclement weather, and is scheduled for this coming Sunday, at Town Commons from 3:30 to 6, and it's April 30th. So come and enjoy, celebrate the earth with Carrboro.
Thanks for that reminder, Randy. Hopefully it will still be on this Sunday, but we'll figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
Watch the weather. Susan, you're next.
I was going to give a plug for Earth Day, so I'm covered.
I just note that the Chapel Hill Transit Partners Committee will meet this Thursday at 10 o'clock, I believe, via Zoom. Any other meetings to note? Okay. All right, next up on our agenda, we will hear public comment. These are public comments on matters that are not on our agenda tonight. So I have a list of 4 people signed up to speak. And I'm just going to go in order. So Meg, and you're first. Come on up. And just so for everyone's benefit, we do ask that speakers keep to 3 minutes or less, and I will be.
3 minutes.
Excellent.
I'm new to this, so fingers crossed I can manage it.
I'll be gentle, but I will be timing you.
All right, I hear you. All right. It's probably no secret that Duncan and I love living and raising our kids in Carrboro. We love that this town focuses on and puts resources towards inclusivity and social and climate justice. I was excited to read Carrboro's comprehensive plan and to read the input of residents about their desire to not only preserve the few green spaces left, but to build more parks and make them accessible to all, and to work towards all residents being within a 10-minute walk shed of a park. When I recently heard about the plan to expand the Westwood Cemetery into one of the last green spaces in town, one that gives lower income families in apartments and condos a place to walk to and enjoy with pets and children, I was surprised and curious to know the reasoning. Fidelity Street and Davie Road are outside of the 10-minute park's walkshed, and dedicating the green space on Fidelity Street as a park would expand that to an entire area which is currently excluded. I was interested to hear what the reasons might be for expanding the cemetery into the green space, and that voice is an understandable champion for residents who would like to continue to be able to purchase affordable traditional burial space for themselves or their loved ones. However, in doing research on who is buried in Westwood Cemetery in the past 5 years, the vast majority, more than 80%, were not Carrboro residents. I provided a detailed list as well. As a thoughtful resident, I would need more information to understand why the town of Carrboro would want to continue subsidizing traditional burial plots for non-residents. As it is, anyone of any income bracket from anywhere can buy a burial plot in Westwood Cemetery, and there are currently no green burial options available in Carrboro, as the spaces allotted in the old Carrboro Cemetery have already been purchased. If Carrboro truly wants to continue to offer affordable burial space to future generations, it makes sense to invest in land just a few minutes outside of town, where traditional, cremation, aquamation, and green burial plots can be offered. As for those who will be directly impacted, I've included the petition started by Fidelity Street resident Bob Proctor, which currently has 34 signatures and 10 unique comments from residents in support of keeping the green space for a park, the vast majority of whom live in condos or apartments on Fidelity Street. I've also included an informal poll I conducted yesterday in our White Oak Facebook group. Of the now 20 residents who voted so far, 100% said they would prefer to retain the green space and have it dedicated as a Carrboro park rather than have the cemetery expanded. Trying to come to a compromise would be costly and complex. Estimates for the combo option I saw were far more than investing in rural land for a new cemetery. It would lead to only a handful of plots that would fill up quickly on that remaining green space. Space and trees that will be essential in an urban setting as we face climate change, and pass the buck to council members just a few years down the road. In the words of Ron Swanson, never half-ass 2 things, whole-ass 1 thing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Meg.
Yeah.
All right, next on the list is Chris Pendergrass. Welcome, Chris. I got you, yeah.
And forgive me from sounding gross. I'm getting over a cold from last week. So. Hi, my name is Chris Pendergrass. I want to share my feedback on the ongoing conversations around land use for the Westwood Cemetery area and the large field next to the current cemetery. I've lived in Carrboro since 2012, and since 2015, I've been at Fidelity Court at 400 Davie Road in the townhomes. Like many folks, I came here as a student, but I stayed here in the community. My grandfather grew up in Carrboro, and actually my great uncle lived on Hillsborough Street his entire life and is actually buried at Westwood Cemetery, along with several other my family members. I know there are ongoing conversations about extending the cemetery into the field, and I want to strongly advocate for the field space instead to be preserved as public green space. I'm out in the field nearly every day with my dog. I see lots of other folks frequently just enjoying that space, also with their dogs reading on a blanket or just appreciating the trees and the perimeter. I think the closest dog park is up at Anderson Park on Highway 54, and I think the other closest park area in Carrboro would be Wilson Park, which isn't in walking distance, and is surrounded mostly by single-family homes. And so, yes, due to the denser multifamily housing along Fidelity Street, Bim Street, and of course the 50-plus units at 400 Davie Road, I think it's really total, like 300 housing units. That field is a really wonderful green space within walking distance that's accessible. I know that Town Commons is also close by, but it's smaller, and to me serves a different function for the community. The field at Westwood Cemetery is a really unique, large, open public green space in the immediate walking distance for those local residents. And I know specifically for the first few years that I lived in Carrboro, I didn't have a car, so the fact that that walking distance was really significant for me. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Being able to just walk out my front door and have this really incredible green space continues to be an ongoing contributor to my well-being in the community. And I think for that of my neighbors as well, and I'd like to see that continue. Thanks. Oh, here's a picture of my dog in the park. Or not in the park, but well, hopefully in what could be a park. So.
Thanks very much, Chris. All right, the next speaker on the list is Chris Young. Welcome back.
Council members, thank you once again for the opportunity to speak tonight. Tonight I'm here to represent the new, now 10-person committee, Make Carrboro Parks. Our goals are to defend our dwindling green spaces near our homes, protest the expansion of the Westwood Cemetery, and advocate for a positive alternative in the form of a park. Friday, we launched a 25-page website called makepark.org. It quotes the comprehensive plan goals, ensure equitable access to parks and natural spaces, and prioritize access for BIPOC people in siting new parks. A Fidelity Park would be within walking distance to the Glosson, Alabama African-American neighborhood. Our website also quotes the comprehensive plan, which says that a new dog park is needed in central Carrboro, which is where the green space is. Another page lists 30 reasons for making a park. We currently have about 50 yard signs, 500 business cards, and 200 flyers, just so you know that people are serious about this. We'll have a table at the farmers market 5 times from April 29th through June 21st, plus 4 more times in the fall and another one before election. Since Friday, our website has had 277 visitors, over 900 views, and our change.org petition has had over 435 views and 33 signers and many comments. Here are 2 such comments. Oops. Well. We have so little green space in this area of Carrboro, and we take the kids there often to enjoy it. It would be incredible to have this space be designated a park for those of us on and around Fidelity Street for now and future generations. Oops. As a longtime resident of the area, I can appreciate the benefits and growth and development. I also very much appreciate what little green space remains in our community, especially that which is within walking distance or biking distance. With open, accessible, and inviting spaces being the exception, it would be a real shame to miss this opportunity to create and preserve just such a place. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. All right, next person on the list is Jamarius Waller. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Jamarius Waller. I moved to Carrboro last October, so I'm fairly new to the area. But the first thing I did notice when I came here was actually the green area right by the cemetery. I have a 3-year-old daughter. She'll be 4 next month. The first place we actually went was there. We like to bring our blanket out, let her paint, just just family fun time, honestly. And we honestly didn't even know that it was a park kind of right here by where they have the farmers market until we took the J bus one time and walked past it. We visited frequently, but we live in Hillmont, so for her, like on a hot day, it's a very kind of long walk for her. So having a park right there would really be good, not only to build community and friendship, but also like with me being from Durham, I love astronomy, and we really don't get to see too many stars. And at night, it's just the most beautifulest view ever. And she's begun to love stars, and sometimes we even get to see constellations. So honestly, instead of having the graveyard, instead of expanding the graveyard, I think a park would be really good there. And then also with the children pediatrics being, in a sense, right next door, that would be a good idea along with the traffic with the highway being right off Jones Ferry Road. Once they leave the pediatrics, the route that they would take, they would kind of miss the park. So the park wouldn't be used as much as it should be for kids, especially with how much we had to stay in the house during COVID and stuff. So a lot of people have kind of gotten out of touch with physical communication with people. So I would just think it would be a good idea to have a park there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamarius. Appreciate you coming out tonight. Okay, that was our list of speakers for tonight. Appreciate everybody being here. I don't have anyone else on the list, so we're going to move on to the next part of the agenda.
You just, since there's interest in the park, ask the
Actually,
manager
good
about.
question, Sammy. Yeah, Mr. Manager, so I think the last direction by the town council was to have an upcoming work session to continue the discussion of this topic. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Have we set a date for that work session yet?
We have not. We need to talk about that and determine what night we can do that on.
Have to be sometime soon, I think. Thanks for that question, Sammy. Thank you, Mr. Manager. And thanks, everyone. There will be a work session coming up. We're just putting it on the calendar, so it's on the way. All right. All right, we'll move on, Mr. Manager, to the consent agenda, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is the approval of the June 21st, 2022 minutes with changes by Councilmember Romaine. The next item is a request to set legislative public hearings for conditional rezoning at 501 South Greensboro Street and associated text amendments. The town received a petition to amend the existing M-3-CD district at 501 South Greensboro Street, known as South Green. The application includes a request for text amendment to add certain multifamily residential uses to the M-3-CZ district and other associated changes relating to the proposed residential uses. The town council must receive public comment before considering this request. Resolutions setting public hearings are provided for the council's use. The next item is request to set a public hearing on land use ordinance text amendments relating to attendance for board and commission members. The purpose of this agenda item is for the town council to set a public hearing to consider amendments to the land use ordinance to revise notification associated with attendance requirements.
Thanks very much. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Could I pull 2 and 3? 2 is just a yes or no question, and I apologize. I could have asked it over email, but I didn't notice it.
So your motion can be to approve number 1? Is there a second? By Susan, so moved by Eleazar, seconded by Susan to approve item number 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Okay, Sammy, number 2.
Yeah, it's just a very quick question. I just wanted to ask Trish, maybe if M3CZ, the only place zoned for M3CZ is that property, correct? Okay, that's all I need to know. Thanks.
Would you move that item, Sammy?
I'll move that item.
For a second, seconded by Eleazar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously.
And
Number
then on the third one, on item 3, I would like for this to be referred to more, it's currently the resolution says it's going to be referred to just to the planning board, but there are other advisory boards that are affected, and I would like for them to provide some input on how they think about it. And for the ones that aren't specifically named in the amendment that we're talking about, I guess there's a question for Wesley that I didn't ask over email. It has to do with the other advisory boards are mentioned in our advisory board policy document. Is there an expectation that we'll be amending that also to reflect this? And so perhaps it would be good to have all those groups included in providing us feedback all at once, instead of like having come back and when we amend that. Does that make sense?
And we're planning to have that on the May 23rd meeting for everything, so we should be able to get some feedback from everyone before then.
Advisory boards, okay.
And that would be when the public hearing would be for the text amendments for those that's contained in the land use ordinance, and then the other advisory boards that are listed in the town code to amend everything all at once. But you do have to have the public hearing for the land use ordinance because that's just following the statute.
So for the resolution, I'd like to amend it to include all the advisory boards, not just, and with that amendment, I'll move this item.
Second.
It's been moved by Sammy that we adopt a resolution amended to include all of the advisory boards affected by this change. And it's been seconded by Randy. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Thanks, Sammy, for pulling that. Okay. Mr. Manager, on to other matters, please.
The next item is a resolution to amend to award a contract to Griffin & Strong PC to perform a disparity study for the town of Carrboro. The purpose of the agenda item is to request that the town council award a contract to conduct a disparity study for contracting and procurement, and to authorize the town manager to sign any necessary documents. And John Hartman Brown, our Economic Development Director, has an overview.
Welcome, John.
Good evening, everyone. Just have a quick overview presentation. In addition to the staff report and the resolution and racial equity questions in your packet. So just a little bit of background. The council approved the project ordinance. We're going to be using ARPA funds for this. And this was approved as part of that project ordinance back in October. We issued the RFP on February 5th of this year. And we had the proposals due back by March 3rd. We received 4 proposals back: Griffin & Strong PC, Mentor Documents and Consulting, MGT Consulting, and Miller 3 Consulting. I'm not sure if it's Miller Cubed or Miller 3, but we'll go with Miller 3.
Miller footnote 3.
Yeah. So as a part of the RFP, some of the deliverables we requested were that they, of course, did some categorize our contracts over the past 5 years and really identify the contracts awarded, what the values were, and how many they were over the last 5 years. We asked them to do an analysis of the procurement from minority and women-owned businesses. We also asked for them to do an analysis of the availability of minority and women-owned businesses within our marketplace. Also to look at, seek out public input, business input and feedback regarding concerns from the business community as well as, and specifically, minority and women-owned businesses. We've also requested that they give us monthly progress reports, recommendations for program changes that we might need to make to our policies, and that they'll prepare a final report and do a presentation before the town council. So once the proposals came in, we assembled a staff review committee made up of myself, the deputy finance director, and the town manager. And there were a list of things that we considered. For example, what experience they had with similarly sized communities, whether they had public sector or private sector experience, the ability to meet the requirements that we've set forth in the RFP, what the staff qualifications were, the methodology they'll use to conduct the study. We asked for references, we asked them for completion timeline, and of course, project cost. So just a general summary of what we received. Almost everyone, except one, gave us a 12-month timeline for completion. The costs range from $280,000 to $421,000. And we really wanted to look at the methodology. The crossing case is the one, for those of you who aren't familiar with this case, this is a Supreme Court case that basically requires and that there's a statistical analysis done to determine that we have to have, that there is a disparity before we can implement policies and procedures and programs that will show any kind of racial preference. Our team, staff review team, narrowed it down to two firms, Griffin and Strong and Miller 3, and we then did a 30-minute interview on both of the firms, and ultimately the staff came out with a recommendation of Griffin and Strong PC, and really, as you can see, there's a whole list of reasons why we felt that they were the preferred firm. But they have extensive experience in North Carolina as well as in the Triangle. They've worked with Durham and Durham County. They've also had a good interview. They were, of course, the best priced. They were in line with their methodology and timeline, so they were mentioning these Supreme Court cases as far as they're following the methodology. They had very well qualified staff, and of course, their deliverables met our requirement for our RFP. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you all have. The one thing that I guess that we would also add is whichever firm you select tonight, we will, of course, inform them initially of all of our care work and racial equity work that we're doing so they can take that into consideration as part of the overall process.
Thank you, John. Before I take questions from council members, I just want to ask if you would, for the benefit of folks who are listening at home or here in our vast audience of onlookers, just a reminder of why are we doing this? What is the purpose of doing a so-called disparity study for our contracting and why are we doing this?
Yeah, sure. So disparity study really steps back and looks at all of our contract awards over a particular period of time. In this case, we're looking at a 5-year period, and attempts to discern whether there is any kind of racial disparity or sex disparity in who we're awarding contracts to. So if we seem to be preferring or selecting more contracts that are owned by white firms or owned by male-dominated firms, then that might be an indication that there's a disparity, an unintentional disparity, mind you, but a disparity nonetheless, compared to what our overall market, the number of firms in our overall market by each of the different contracting categories. So really, it's just looking at what's in the marketplace available to us to have firms work for us, and comparing and contrasting that against the actual number of firms that we're awarding contracts to and buying goods and services from.
And so really this kind of analysis sets us up as a town government to inform how we're doing things now and how we could be doing them better.
Correct.
And we need a study like this, as I've had this conversation with the town manager a few times, that we need a study like this to meet the requirements of the court cases that you mentioned, because the town has to check some legal boxes before we can embark on any kind of minority or women-owned business enterprise program. So I just think it's important for folks to understand why this is so important for us to do and what it could really mean for the future of our town and in the way that we contract and procure services in the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
A hand from Danny. Are there others? And Susan.
So thank you, John. And before I'll take the suspense out. I will be moving this resolution before I'm done talking here. Really appreciate your work. and the recommendation, I think I'm inclined to support it. Hopefully my questions are complimentary and not a big waste of time. So this is really pertaining to procurement, the work contracts that are going to the town, and sort of that side of supporting minority and women-owned businesses. I'm curious about a couple things. Does the Crossin, I guess, requirement, does that apply to all enterprise programs? You know, sort of any assistance we might offer minority and women-owned businesses, you know, sort of outside of procurement, you know, like, or are we able to have enterprise funds that can support those businesses, like aside, you know, say grant money or other things like that?
So the crossing case specifically addresses pure procurement. I would lean probably a little bit more on Nick as far as some of the other programs that we might do. There are, and we have done programs where we're doing grants or any type of competitive program. We can certainly include that as a part of, and have included, you know, BIPOC-owned businesses or women-owned businesses as a prioritization in a ranking scale as one of many criteria. But I would lean on Nick as far as any specific targeted either race or sex-based funding.
I do think that answers the substance of my question and confirms. I mean, I think that we have done programs like that, and it sounds like they sort of do exist outside of. So, I mean, I guess I'm interested in whether this work can feed sort of a town's systematic understanding of barriers that minority and women-owned business face. You know, like outside of procurement, essentially. You know, so I think, you know, for instance, if there is a particular barrier that business owners of color face regularly, I guess this wouldn't quite answer that for us. But we would not necessarily need to like go to the same kind of like rigor and length necessarily. That's maybe like the kind of outreach we could do as a town. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's something we could do as a town. I think that the disparity study will help us really narrow in on what that market is, and then help us really kind of hone in then more specifically on what some of those barriers may be. So, you know, I think the bigger thing here is we have to understand what the market looks like as far as minority and women-owned businesses, and whether they can meet the threshold of service level that we need. And if not, then we've got work to do. You know, then we can at that point start looking at, okay, why do they not have that threshold? What can we do to help support them meet that? Whether it's they just don't have the right supplies, or, you know, their supplier is not able to meet our demand. And so then we can start working with that and looking at more specifically, how do we put policies or programs in place that we can help support that.
Well, that really strikes me as some added value that we're getting here in terms of sort of just understanding our market and landscape outside of even just this narrow procurement question. And so your answers have been really helpful in sort of orienting me to thinking about that for the future. And I would like to move the resolution awarding Griffin and Strong the contract.
Annie, before I go on to Susan, is there a second?
A second.
So it's been moved by Danny and seconded by Susan to award the contract. Continue discussing.
Andy.
I'm sorry, Randy seconded. I had Susan in my mind because she's next on my list to speak. So Susan, you're next. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. And Danny, I appreciate those questions. They're really helpful. John, thank you for all of this information. First of all, I did want to say I'm thrilled we're undertaking this disparity study. Very happy to see that Griffin and Strong is a minority-owned business, and also very happy to see that should they get the contract, they would be doing some subcontracting with BL Wall, which is minority and women-owned. So great to see all of this happening. A few questions from me, and this is going to be a little bit random. I'm sorry I'm not more organized with my questions, but let's go back to this. Was it Crossin, the Supreme Court decision?
Mm-hmm.
So we're
Crossin.
Crossin.
Yes.
Thank you, Manager. And we're going to do this disparity study, and I'm a little bit curious in terms of to what extent how do I phrase this? I'm sure that there are guidelines in terms of just how much disparity there is before we are in a position to then do some specific targeting of minority women-owned businesses and will still be, sort of withstanding the scrutiny of the court of law. I assume there's guidelines for just how much disparity there is before we can start this targeting process. Does that question make sense?
It does, and that's what the study will show us, just how much disparity there is within our marketplace.
And my question is, if it's a little bit, then we really can't do any specific targeting. If it's a lot, then we can. There are guidelines for us in terms of what level of disparity, I assume.
Yeah, I'm thinking that our consultants will guide us through that as they bring the report back and give us some indication to your point of just how much disparity there is and then what the recommendations are, how we address that, depending on the level of disparity that exists.
Mm-hmm. And then going back to this Croson decision, you mentioned, John, it would influence decisions around minority-owned, but will that also, is it the same decision that influences the women-owned businesses? They're all in the same thing there. That same decision is for women-owned businesses as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's the that exact case does, but it would be a following case it would be the same concept. So if we're going to show preference towards a racial preference, then we could also show that for a sex as well.
And then just the 5 minutes of research I did on these disparity studies, I noticed that some disparity studies also include veterans. And was that considered at all when we undertook this, or is it really pretty common just to be focusing on minority and women-owned businesses?
Most of the studies that I'm familiar with really only look at racial and sex disparities. I haven't seen any that really focus on, or that I've looked at it yet, at least, that focus on veteran-based.
Because that's what the Croson case covered. It didn't cover veterans.
Okay.
And that's what this is based on. That.
Okay, got you. This is kind of related to Danny's question, but I know that we award each year hundreds of thousands of dollars through these outside agency grants. Will that be also included in this disparity study?
I don't believe that would include the outside agency allocations. This would strictly be looking at contract awards and procurement. So how are we purchasing, what services, goods and services are we purchasing?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another question is this, it has come up before during my time on council in terms of the places where we actually do our advertising. And I know there's been a very intentional effort to try to advertise for some of our procurements in more, to try to reach more diverse, a bigger range of minority women-owned businesses. Will that be part of this study? Will we get suggestions? Assuming that we work with Griffin and Strong, will this include recommendations for us on how we can advertise in markets where we are more likely to be reaching minority women-owned businesses?
Yeah, that's included as a part of their study. So they will give us policy recommendations and procedure recommendations. So, if there's some other area, something that we're not doing, they will make that recommendation.
Mm-hmm. I think this is my last question. So once we get the results of the disparity study, we're in a position to maybe do a little bit more targeting minority women-owned businesses. Do we need to, is there kind of a part of this process is, 5 years down the road, you're looking at the results of these programs that you have put in place, and then you see to what extent you're addressing the disparity? Is that how you envision this happening?
Yeah, so, typically they come back with the recommendations for policy. We'd implement those policies or those recommendations. A lot of times that may even include putting a program in place, to Danny's point, really looking at how do we kind of help encourage more minority and women-owned businesses to get them to a place where they can bid on projects, and then undergo another disparity study in 4 to 5 years to again reassess where are we with our disparity in contracts and awarding contracts.
Hopefully see an improvement.
Yes, that's the goal.
Yes. Good. Well, this is really helpful. I'm very excited that the town is undertaking this. I'm happy we had this ARPA money to be able to do it, and looking forward to hearing about the results. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Susan. Sammy?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. I just wanted to understand. So we're comparing firms to the overall market so that we can say, well, given that there's this much minority representation in the market, we should be equaling that proportion. But perhaps to Danny's point, if the market is insufficient relative to what the general population makeup is, will this study highlight or identify that difference? In other words, if the market doesn't have minority representation, will we be able to allocate funds to create that market?
I don't know. I think that's a little bit of a different process from what the disparity study will. I mean, the disparity study can give us kind of that information, but then what we do with that, so that's kind of a separate issue. So the disparity study is not necessarily going to say, we need to create more BIPOC businesses in the community, but that might be something that we decide, that you all decide that we need to create more to better match what we desire of the population. And so that's where we can then, to Danny's point, get to more of the programming components and really think about how do we create that market.
So I guess for me, what I'd be interested in doing shouldn't be so hard. I mean, I presume there's some kind of shed of, area that we're surveying. And then within that area, like what is the demographic makeup? And so what's the market proportion relative to that demographic makeup? And if there's a difference, then that would flag for us, we should be maybe not just Carrboro, because I presume it's a pretty big geography, but we can relate to our partners and work towards creating some kind of effort to diversify the market. Would they be able to just define what that geography is and say, this is the demographic makeup of this geography?
I don't know that they'll give us you're talking about the population actual by race versus actual number of firms as
Basically,
percentages.
Comparing the findings on the market availability study to the general demographics of the region.
Yeah. I don't know that they will specifically do that. They will define our region, our market region, and then at that point, it's
Clarify also, John, and Randy is next. This is also the analysis is done sort of by sector, right? It's not just sort of an overall market study. It's market study within a particular service sector or some other market sub-market.
Yeah.
We'll have good information for different kinds of services and contract areas that we're trying to contract.
And what they're looking at would be minority and women-owned businesses. That's the population they're looking for. Those firms that are 51% or greater owned by minority and or women. That's what they're looking.
Yeah.
When you say population, that's population. I understand the demographics, the makeup of the community, but they're looking for those specific businesses.
Yeah, I
based on
understand
ownership.
that. And what I want to understand is how does the
relate to the
market
general
compare to the
population?
general population? Because that's a disparity too. And if it isn't too late to include that ask them to include that information, if it's not too expensive. I don't know if there's amendments or not. Might not hurt to just ask them, is that something you could include? Because it will make them more attractive too if next time they do a disparity study somewhere else, like they provide this too.
Yeah, sure, we can ask that.
Randy?
Yeah, John, it was my understanding when I was reading through the material that one of the things that this work will produce is it will inform where the market is missing or where there's gaps for minority business, BIPOC business, and women-owned business, correct? Okay, so let me just give you an example, because when I read this, this is what I kind of imagined could be done with that information, which I think is what folks are kind of talking about here, which is, the way I saw it is, let's say it's construction drywall, right? And there were not enough minority businesses bidding, correct? Okay, so we would be able to know that in this sector, we don't have that, the cohort of construction folks focus on drywall. That information for us, I think it would be helpful. We were able to take that information from the report and then share it with Durham Tech and El Centro and, organizations that are moving people into the working fields to know this is a ripe area for growth. Have I got this right?
That's not what the study will do.
Study is gonna
But
be the
that's
disparity
the,
between
No, I'm
what's
talking about
in
it,
the market
but
and
they
what the
will,
town is contracting for.
right, it will reveal the information. That's all I'm saying, is that when I was reading this, I was thinking that would be a use for that information beyond us knowing for ourselves. Have I got that right?
I mean, yes, it will provide the data, and we can use that then to kind of take a next step. So if we so choose to create programs or something like that to help support or create more
And
business.
network the information. That's
Yeah.
how I saw it. Okay, that's how I saw it. Thank you so much.
But the study will not necessarily. Yeah.
No. But it gives us that snapshot that we're able to say to the folks that we work with, this is an area of work growth that we would like to have, folks know about.
Absolutely.
Andy. Okay, so attachment A in the agenda packet is the resolution would award the contract, as among other things, and we have a motion by Danny and a second by Randy to approve that resolution. Is there any further discussion? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The matter passes unanimously. Thanks very much, Don, and to the team who brought us this great firm. I think we're moving on to other, matters by council members. Sammy, do you have
Yeah, I
one?
just wanted to share with you, I promised that I would hear back from the Climate Council, and I did hear some things that kind of affirmed some of our conversation that night, including this question of having more meetings for the Climate Council. There was an interest in that. I think we kind of set the threshold, like minimum of 2 is what we hope the language will be. And then the other interest was, recognizing all this federal money, that there really be an effort towards common collaboration. And where we left that off was that it doesn't preclude that from happening, correct? And so I'm still, one more thing was, in the specificity, we identified a couple of nonprofits we thought might be good to have represented. It was brought up that there may have been hesitancy by the county with the Sierra Club specifically because they have endorsement process, and there was a feeling that there may be a conflict there. And so in lieu of it being specifically the Sierra Club, there's an idea of perhaps another environmental organization, and one that works a lot with electricity, and we've related to a lot too. Sally, forget her Robert said, NC Warren. So just wanted to run that by y'all as I do a little draft, which just includes those minimal things. I might instead include, or maybe just say Sierra Club or NC Warren, just so that the county might feel a little more comfortable with an alternative.
Thanks for following up on that, Sammy. So would you mind sharing those notes with, or your summary of those notes with the manager, because I assume the staff will be kind of doing this conversation with the other
Sure.
jurisdictions, and that way he'll have that on hand to share with our counterparts.
Sure.
Sammy, did it come up about NAACP or El Centro, or as ways to ensure that there would be more diversity on this group?
No, that wasn't really, this was just feedback over email, and I didn't get any specific feedback about those two that I can recall.
We have that resolution we adopted last time, or that decision we made last time about feedback, and then sort of pile this on with it. That'll be part of the conversation for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that follow-up. Entertain a motion to adjourn by Sammy, seconded by Eleazar, and we are adjourned. I assume we all agree.
Oh, I didn't.